I'm going to go back for a second. So Ryan's been with the NHL for 22 seasons, retired now, over 1,400 hockey games. He has an interest in officiating coaching. In fact, he is heavily involved in developing the next generation of high performance officials as he currently works in a supervisory role with NCAA hockey based in Minnesota. Unique perspective, brings lots of experience. It's really cool to chat with Ryan about his own experiences, but also to learn about his passion for officiating coaching. So really looking forward to this session this evening. I'm glad everyone could join us. So just a couple of things I want to get out of the way in beforehand. So what we did was when you signed up, we took a list of questions. We asked you sort of what did you want us to talk about, and so we developed themes from them. And so themes were around coaching and mentorship, developing young new officials, career development pathways, game management, on ice situations, recruitment, retention, and just personal experiences and lessons from the NHL. So we've kind of condensed this because again, 2 hours flies by fast. Hopefully, for those of you that pose questions, they'll be actually reflected here in some of the discussion this evening. We will leave time, a few minutes at the end as well, if your question wasn't answered. If you have any comments throughout, I just ask to use the chat function. Megan, if you don't mind keeping an eye on the chat, that would be great. And put any questions you have in there. And like I said, when you're here, if you can mute yourself, just so that we don't get a lot of cross noise, that would be wonderful. So, welcome, Ryan. Thanks for jumping on with us tonight.
Well, thanks, Sean. Thank you for that very generous introduction. Sincerely appreciate it. What a thrill! What an honor to be here. As I left the ice, I'll go back even further. Even before I was when I was on the ice, I always had a genuine passion for wanting to help out with the development of the next group of officials and trying to give back to the game as much as I can. So, having left the ice and being able to find a role that fits that really has been a great transition coming off the ice. First off, thanks to you and Megan, Sean, for hosting this, for having that. We had a great discussion a couple weeks back, like you said. Really excited to be a part of this, and hopefully I can help out with the program that Hockey Canada is trying to institute here.
Yep.
I'd like to thank everybody else that's also on this call. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and spending a couple hours to share. This isn't going to be a one-way conversation. This isn't just about what my experiences are. I hope to learn as much from you folks as hopefully you'll be able to take away from this. So I feel like this is a two-way conversation, which I think is important in any role in the coaching role. But thank you for taking the time, and more importantly, thank you for recognizing the importance of what mentorship, and I'm trying to break away from the term supervisor, but coaching, how important that is to our future. And I'll use our and my connection to Hockey Canada runs deep. I wouldn't have had the career that I had it not been for what Hockey Canada gave to me. So when I say our program and I own this as much as I know each and every one of you do. So thank you for having me. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And I'm really excited to spend the next couple hours with you talking about my coaching experience.
Well, we're delighted to have you. So, first question is kind of about your own career perspective. So, like we said at the top, 22 seasons the NHL, over 1,400 games. So, for you, looking back, what were the key steps in your development that helped you reach the NHL, and what advice would you give officials today who want to move to that next level?
Sure. So I'll give you a little bit of my history, my progression, and where I started. So the way I got started was my neighbor's son played hockey. He was a little 5, 6, 7-year-old, and they were looking for somebody to come out and drop pucks at the outdoor rink. So at 10 years old, Mr. Dale asked his other son, Chris, and I if we'd go out and drop the pucks, and that's where it all began. I got paid with a hot chocolate and a hot dog after the game, and I thought it was the I thought it was the coolest thing just to be out there chasing pucks and being a part of the game. When I was 12, back then, you were able to get certified at 12. Both my older brothers refereed, and being the typical Canadian younger brother, I wanted to follow in their footsteps. So when I was able to get actually certified, that's when I hopped in and got my certification. I worked my way up, worked all different levels, right from 5, 6, 7 year olds to minor pro and everything in between, university hockey. Had a couple international assignments that I was fortunate enough to get from Hockey Canada. And then in 2002, I got hired to my dream job of working as a linesman in the NHL. As Sean said, spent 22 seasons there, and I feel so incredibly fortunate to have had the ability to call that my career and truly live out a dream. The one thing that I always believed, though, when I was on the ice was as important about what you did off the ice, what you were giving back to the game, and trying to make it better. So my off ice involvement was I was involved as a mentor and an instructor, clinic instructor. I was on a few committees with Hockey Manitoba. I was their master course conductor for a few years. And actually in 2001, I was asked by Hockey Canada to get involved with being part of writing one of the first mentorship manuals that Hockey Canada was creating. We flew out to Calgary for it, brought a great group of people together, and I was really fortunate to be a part of that. Also, for those old timers on the call here that remember this far back, was also asked to write a couple sections with regards to linesmen for the old CHOP manual. So that was, as I said, I always felt my off ice involvement was as important to what I was doing on the ice. So my advice, Sean, to anybody who's trying to, and the NHL is it's the pinnacle, it's the epitome, but there's so many other things along the way. And if whatever your goal is, whether it's working the national championship, getting an international assignment, or getting to the NHL, getting to the PWHL, anything, whatever it is, just make sure it's a passion. Make sure it's something you absolutely love. And then make sure you're working at every level as much as you can to get the reps. I mean, that's critically important. The more experience you have at whatever level, the more experiences you have at other levels just makes you that much sharper when you get to that level that you're striving for. And as I said, make sure you're giving back as much to the game as you take from it. I always felt that the more you were involved, the more people who knew who you were and they knew your passion for it, it gave you a better sense of the entirety of the program. And being part of the program away from the ice, I think, also makes you better when you're on the ice. You understand kind of why we do things, why things happen the way they do. And I think having that off-ice involvement is as important as what you do on the ice. And the last thing I'll say, we all want to get there tomorrow. That's the thing. We all want to get there as quickly as we can. It took me 18 years of working amateur hockey before I got hired into the NHL. So there's going to be hurdles, there's going to be hiccups, there's going to be things along the way, but just have the patience and be the master at the level you're working right now before you move on to that next level. I think that's a critically important thing that I think a lot of our officials think that, I had success at this level, I had success at this game, now I'm ready for the next step. And I think you really need to master that level before you move on. And hey, listen, that's what our job is as coaches, is to make sure they are the masters at those levels. Sean, you're muted there.
Of course, you'll be repeating that several times over the evening. I think you said something really interesting there, Ryan. You talked about, letting people know your interests, right? That, you are interested in developing and moving up. And sometimes in some cultures around the hockey world, particularly in the officiating side, is like, you don't want to appear too eager, that you worry about how that will be perceived by others, and you're supposed to kind of sit back and wait for things to happen. Like, did you have any experience with that yourself? And how do you respond to an official that worries about coming across as maybe too arrogant or too cocky?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. So my goal was to get to the NHL, and I've always been told if you don't work a Memorial Cup, you'll never get to the NHL. Well, I never worked the Memorial Cup, and when it was finally my what I felt was my opportunity to work the Memorial Cup, and I never got the assignment, I thought that's it, doors closed, right? But you put that aside and you realize that even though that door closed, there are other avenues and there are other ways to accomplish your goals. And as soon as you put the hurdle in front of yourself, then that's when it stops. And I think that's the critical thing, and that's the important thing, is that when you do have that hurdle in front of you, that you just jump over it. You try to find the way to get past it. I think it's really important for officiating coaches, for directors of officials, for leagues to be honest and don't shy away from telling an official what they need to do to get to that next level. And I really, when I look back in my career, and the one thing I regret is that I wasn't an advocate enough for myself, and I didn't ask the questions that I needed to ask at times. They would have maybe given me the information I needed to get to the next level that I wanted to achieve. So I think for as an official, there's a way of doing that where you can ask the questions for the sake of sincerity and wanting to know the answers without coming across as cocky and arrogant. I've always felt that at the end of the day, I still had to look at myself in the mirror. And if I ever felt like I did something to put myself ahead of somebody else having that opportunity, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror and be, confident that I got there for the right reason. So when you have an official that comes to you that's asking questions, understand that for the most part, it's a very legitimate question. They just want to know what they need to do. And sometimes it's a proverbial don't ask the question if you don't want to hear the answer. But as coaches, we need to do that. We need to give them the information they need in order for them to succeed.
Excellent. Thank you. So, moving on. You are, currently supervising, or sorry, currently coaching officials
We're
in
gonna
the,
break it down. We're
I'm
gonna
going to make
break
that
it.
mistake all night. You're currently coaching officials in the NCAA. What is the most effective, what are the most effective ways to provide feedback in your experience that actually helps officials improve?
Well, first off and foremost, and I kind of alluded to that in my previous answer, was just being honest and straightforward. Um, when there's something that needs to be addressed, you're not doing a service by sugarcoating it. You have to address it. You have to deal with it, not only for the betterment of the official, but also for the what's the best for the game. We want to make sure our officials are best prepared. So being honest and straightforward. I also feel it's important that when we go into those coaching sessions that we bring everyone into the conversation. I've had every type of coach that I think you could imagine, from the guy who comes in and kicks the garbage can to the coach that comes in and says, "Well, you're a linesman and I was a referee and I really don't know what you do, so I've got nothing for you." We need to be able to have and provide information for everybody that's in the room and bring people into the conversation. Don't have it just be that you're the dictator there telling them what they need to do. I think I think the more we give officials the opportunity to self-recognize, explore what they're doing, guide them towards guide them towards what we're trying to accomplish, what our goal is, and have them come up with the way to get there. Now, there's times where you're going to have to go in, and you're going to have to say, you know what, your positioning was you were way far behind, or your rules knowledge isn't there. But when it comes to some of the subtle intricacies of the game, some of the things that really sets a top official apart, is giving them the flexibility to work within the parameters of what the procedures and the standards are, but also letting them explore how best to accomplish that. The more we can have people talk, the more we can have them think about the game, think about what they just did on the ice, have them see if they can recognize what they could have done differently. we would love to have a supervisor, a coach, a coach, a mentor at every game. But the fact of the matter, that's not possible. So the more we can instill into a younger official or an up and coming official the ability to self critique and self analyze, the better off they are, because we all generally know when we make mistakes. But it's the difference of, once you make a mistake, there's nothing you can do about it. Or once you've done something right, there's nothing you can do. It's what do you learn from it, so that the next time you replicate what you did, or you find out the solution to allow you to make a better decision or get to a better sight line, whatever it is. So the more we involve, I feel the more we involve the officials into the conversation, I think it's a much better coaching experience. I also think it's really easy to pick on the low hanging fruit, right? It's really easy to go in there and pick away at the things that were done wrong. But I think it's also really important to reemphasize and remind them of what they're doing right. Like, for every official that moves up certain level, up to the next level, they're doing a lot of things right to get there. So let's reinforce those good habits, those things that they're doing right. And then we're just trying to polish to that level, right? So don't just go in there with the negatives. Make sure it's a positive experience. Make sure everybody's feeling that they've been served by the coach. They've got some valuable information, but that they also leave there feeling positive and they're excited for the next game. I like to discuss. I like to. Sorry, Sean.
Yep.
I like to discuss the game as a whole, and then inject specifics. So one of my favorite coaches that I had in the NHL, that's how he saw the game. He would come in and he would talk the game exactly as he would talk the game after a game when he was on the ice. And he was such a expert of the game, scientist of it. Like, it just he had such a firm understanding of the game that he could just talk about the game and be able to highlight what was right, and then talk about things we could do differently. But at no point did it really feel like it was targeted. So everybody in the room felt like they were, we're just rehashing the game. We're just talking. I went to a room last week and I said, okay, let's just talk hockey. I don't want to sit here and tell you what you guys, I want you to explore yourselves and see yourselves what was done right on the ice. I think it's also important, as we're watching the game, that we're addressing trends versus one-offs. Like, there's times where one-offs have to be addressed, but to me, the more important thing is if we're seeing trends. So if we're seeing an official that's constantly behind the player, where we're seeing a linesperson that's not getting up to the line in time, and that's a consistent trend, that to me is the more important thing. If it's a one-off thing, yeah, it's important, and we can correct it. But to me, if we're seeing the bigger trends and what they're doing sort of throughout all three periods of the game, that's the really important stuff that we really need to target. And
Okay.
finally, my most important thing is, when we're talking to them, when we're talking to an official, it can't just be, you have to do this. It can't be, even when we're talking about the procedures and the standards and the expectations, we also have to give the whys. Why do we do that? Why do we need to, be in a better spot? Why do we do signals a certain way? And I think when you explain it to somebody in that sense, where we're explaining why we do something and not just that you have to do it, I think it's a better learning experience, right? Because for me, I know myself, I was a very moldable official. You could tell me something and I would go out and do it the next day. But that's what I needed to hear. I needed to hear the why we do something. Why do we not go up on the boards? Why do we try not to go up on the boards when the players are coming in front of us? Now, you also have to realize that there are flexibility, and there are times where that's essential or that's needed, and give them that flexibility to use good judgment when it's necessary. But if we can explain why we don't do it, or why we need to be ahead of the plays coming into the zone, that's the critical stuff. If we just tell them you need to be ahead, well, that's okay. But if we can explain why, I just think it sends the message in a completely different way. Sorry, Sean, you were going to ask something there.
No, that's excellent. I get one of the follow-up questions I had here is just jotting things down. How do you coach officials though who struggle to recognize their own weaknesses? Like that's great for officials that get it. What about the ones that don't? So they're very defensive about any kind of feedback you give, and they don't seem to recognize that they did anything wrong. Like, how do you work with those kind of officials?
Yeah. What I would do is I would just keep reinforcing, and it's kind of the understanding of our approach as coaches. We also have to understand the approach of the official. Like, they might be very defensive because that's their personality. They think they know everything, but sometimes it's not their delivery. Sometimes it's the message it's underlying. Maybe again, it's they don't understand why you're asking them to do something. Maybe maybe they've been told 100 times, well, you got to do it this way, and they're stuck in their ways. And we have to kind of pick through that, and filter through what the actual message is there. And to give you a hard and fast reason for or way of dealing with it, I think the biggest thing is you just keep reinforcing what you're trying to say. Now, at some point, you need to disconnect from the conversation. Again, if you were having a conversation in the dressing room with all four officials, we can't just be focused on the one guy trying to get him to understand what we're doing. Maybe there comes a point where we have to say, listen, we're going to park this right now, and you and I, we can talk a little bit more about this, and we can address this. Um, and I can give you my explanation for why I'm asking you to do that, and you can give me your rationale or your reason for why that wouldn't work for you. But I think, again, to keep that positivity in the dressing room, I think at some point there might come a point where we just have to park it and come back to it.
Fair enough. So what about related to that, like the tough love, right? I mean, it's often easier, the old style of coaching, as you remember, or actually, I guess let's say supervision, because that's more or less what it was, is the kick in the garbage can. I'm the expert. I'm going in. I'm telling you what you did wrong, and then I'm going out, right? And we've moved away from that more to like collaboration. But at the same time, when do you see um, the need for tough love with some of these folks?
I always like to go back to examples. So I had a situation last year in a college game where the all four officials, they had a tough night. Listen, we've all been there. We understand what that's like, and it's just not working the way you want it to go. But it was a really awkward situation because the commissioner of the league was in the dressing room, and I couldn't sugarcoat it. I can't come in there and you know um, just look at it as an oversight. It had to be addressed, and it's a tough, it's a really tough conversation to have, but it's an absolutely essential thing to have. For me, if anybody who knows me that if I'm fired up, stuff's gone really sideways. So I never want to get to that point. I always want to go in there with the same compassion and understand that I would have expected when I came off the ice after having a tough game. Like, there's times where I know what I did wrong and I don't need somebody else beating me down, but you can still reinforce what needs to be done. And I think the essential part of that is, I'll give you an example. So in that game, we had a couple penalties that were called that were either not called or never even happened, and they knew it. They knew it when they came off the ice. They just had a bad gut feeling about it, right? So instead of beating down about the mistake, it was having the conversation of what can we do different. When you reflect back on the game, when you look back at where you were on that call, when you thought you saw what you did but never actually happened, where were you? What were you looking at? What was your sight line? Could you have battled for better sight line? So you're you're reinforcing what you need to address, but you're doing it in a way that isn't beating them down any worse than they feel. Like, you can still send the message without having them completely disconnect, because once they disconnect, the conversation is basically over, right? So we still need to have a constructive way of talking with an official that still engages and keeps the conversation going. So I go back to the honesty, and just, if it needs to be talked about, it needs to be talked about. Just be cognizant, put yourself back in the shoes of when you came off the ice, and how you would like to be addressed in that situation, and understand that. And you still want to address what needs to be addressed, but just do it in a way that everybody's still leaving a positive feeling.
Excellent. Okay. So let's move on to talk about younger officials. So officials in their first 1 to 3 years. So what habits should they focus on early in their career, and what are the most common mistakes you see developing officials make in your own experience, whether when you were that age or what you see now?
To me, the most important thing in the beginning, in those first foundational years, when we're trying to give them the information that they need to succeed, but also to keep them retained, is to still make sure they have a sense of excitement. Keep them excited to be coming back to the rink. Um, if we can maintain them and wanting to be part of the officiating program, like it does so much better for long-term development for the program, for our program, and for aiding that retention. In my opinion, the first couple of years obviously has to be the foundational things, the procedures, the positioning, um, and giving them the security and the foundation for success. Right. So the more we can instill those basics, the better off they'll be. It's like a player when they go out on the half ice rink. Like they're not taught what offside is. They're not taught what icing is. They're taught how to carry the puck. They're taught how to skate. We're teaching them the foundations. It's no different in the officiating side. We need them to understand the foundations of what's in the procedures manual, what's in the rule book, and giving them the confidence that when they go out there, they understand why they have to do it. Making them realize that their job in the game is more than just going out there for the hot chocolate and hot dog, or the 15-20 bucks, but that they play a really key and pivotal role in the game, and reinforcing that the what they bring to the game is just as important as any other participant within the game. So we need to reinforce that, and really instill that in them.
You said something very interesting in the last couple of questions that stuck with me, and it's the why. And I think back to my own sort of experience when I coach officials, and I don't know that I do that enough, like I think I have it in my own head, so I understand it, so I assume they understand it. But when you're working with a kid who's 13, 14, 15 years old, you know, do you think we're doing that enough, that we're actually explaining the why? So we tell them what we want them to do, like you need to be inside. You shouldn't be jumping up on the glass. You shouldn't be jumping up on the boards. I want you inside the line. Do you think we do a good enough job with the why, of actually explaining this is why that matters?
No, I don't think we do, Sean, and I don't think we do that at any level. I think we go in there far too often with just the robotic version of, you did this, I need you to do that. But the more we can explain the whys of why we do it, even at the grassroots level of explaining to them, and getting those good habits in early, and an understanding of why we do certain things, I think just sets them up for success further on. The 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 absolute critical thing is that we get those foundations in place, those fundamental skills, so that as they progress up through the higher levels and into the next ranks, those become secondary. Those are just the things I do, and now my attention can be more on the more critical things that we need to focus on. The things like, the game management, or the I don't have to worry about getting into the good sight lines, or why I need to be down in the end zone. That's just second nature, and I'm already there. So I think you're exactly right, Sean. The more we talk about that, the more we give them the whys at the start, I go by my experience. As I said, I am a very much tell me what to do and why, and I will do it all day long. I might not do it exactly as you tell me to do it, because maybe how you're explaining it might not work for me, but the end result, I'll get there. I will get to the positioning that I need to get to, or I will get to my line. I will move in. Now I might not do it exactly as you tell me to, but I'm going to do it because I understand why and the importance of doing that. So when we're dealing with young officials, it's a lot easier in my mind to get them to take their arm down later on than it is to get them to put their arm up. So the more we can get them confident to make the penalty calls, the more we can get them confident to stop play when there's an offside early. And we have to realize that there's going to be mistakes made, but the more we can get them to do that, and then if we need to dial it back later on, I think we're better for it. I love to see a young official who has the confidence and the courage to make those kind of calls. And whether you're right or wrong, obviously we want you to be right, but that's not always going to happen. But I want you to have the confidence and courage to react to what you saw and make the call how you saw it. Now we can talk about judgment. We can deal with judgment, but early in somebody's officiating journey, I think it's really important to get that confidence to be able to make that call.
Okay. So there's a couple of questions here in the chat that are kind of relevant to this section. So I'll pose them now. Richard Nero, and thank you for that, Richard. First one was, what approaches have you used to guide younger officials through maltreatment situations while ensuring they follow procedure and continue to build confidence?
That's a great question, Richard. I have such a personal challenge with where sports are in general right now, and I mean I'll leave that for another conversation. But we need to be better at getting rid of the maltreatment. We need to do a better job at that. If we don't, as officials, take the stand, nobody else will. We need to encourage when an official is seeing something or something is being said to them to have the courage, and we support them when they do that. We can't second guess and, geez, did you really need to make that penalty call? Yeah, listen, if they had the courage enough and the confidence enough that that player or that coach or that parent need to be ejected, let's reinforce that. And again, it's like judgment. We can talk about judgment. We can pick through the weeds of the difference between somebody saying "f you" or versus "f off" or whatever. When the difference between something being said personally as opposed to somebody just using poor language, we can deal with that. We can address that. But the bottom line, I still remember. I'm gonna have like PTSD here, and I apologize for using that term. It's so like a throwaway term, but I still remember the first time where I had to eject a coach. And I remember going back to the blue line, and I still remember my knees shaking. That's not an easy spot for an official to be in. And I was probably 14 when it happened. But it had to be done. It had to be addressed. And I think that's the biggest thing is we need to reinforce and encourage the officials when they feel something is crossed the line, we need to support that. We need to encourage them to do it. And if it comes back that the coach didn't say whatever, and if there's a suspension that was supposed to come along with it and he doesn't get the suspension, who cares? Just when it happens, just deal with it and address it. It goes all the way up, and that mindset goes all the way up into high performance. I think we let far too much abuse happen at the higher levels because we have this mentality and this mindset. Well, that's just the culture of the game, but it doesn't need to be the culture of the game. If somebody walked into my office and said that to me, I'd kick them out, or I'd phone the police or have security remove them. So why we allow it to happen in a sports venue, on a hockey rink, or a baseball diamond, whatever it is, I don't know, and we need to be better at it.
So related to that, so thank you for that. Dryden out of PEI here asks, is maltreatment a top-down issue? He says, I used to think it was okay for players, fans, etc., to yell at me if I was skating a senior or junior game, so long as they weren't doing it to the kids officiating a U13 game. But it seems to me that it trickles down. The guy yelling at me in rec league is also probably yelling at the kid doing the U13 team he coaches too. So it's just interested to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I firmly believe I look at where I worked for 22 years and the amount of abuse. And listen, ours is different because the cameras are always on. You're seeing the coaches behind the bench and they're yelling and they're doing whatever they want. And I think that it absolutely trickles down to the lower levels. But I think we also at the professional level, at the HP level, I think we take too much that we encourage the next generation that's watching that says, oh well, Coach Smith said, whatever to the referee. Now I'm a player and 10 years down the road I'm going to be coaching. Well, Mr. Smith said it, so it's okay for me to do it. So I think the more we can reinforce it at the higher levels, 100% I believe it's going to trickle down. I take a look at when we brought in certain rules on standard of play and how when we brought in at the higher levels, how that trickled down into the lower levels, into the junior leagues and into the AAA leagues. I think the same thing has to happen when it comes to maltreatment.
Okay. One of the things that I find interesting, and again, maybe it's more anecdotal, I guess, than anything else, but when I started refereeing, like throwing out a spectator was just not a thing. You just
Yeah,
did not do that, right? And I've noticed in the last number of years, officials are doing more of that. Like I have seen, it's not terribly often, but like there are officials coming through that just will not tolerate that. I mean, what do you think about that? Because it's a weird, it's kind of a weird thing for me to see that. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but it's a weird thing to see. So what's your sense of that?
again, because of the culture we have, I feel like if it gets to the point where somebody feels that that's the appropriate thing, it probably was the appropriate thing. We have such a culture and mindset that we just let it go. So when it does actually cross the line, then you really kind of have to take it seriously. It's like when you have a coach who never yells at you, but then all of a sudden yells, you go, maybe something did go wrong there. And it's kind of the same thing in reverse, that because we allow so much of it when it happens, it probably really had to be in a bad situation. Now, I'm not saying I'm not naive enough to say that every time a parent gets thrown out or every time a coach or a player gets thrown out, it may be appropriate in that situation. And we probably have officials that sometimes have the rabbit ears that are listening too much. But at the same time, if we want something to stop, that needs to happen. Like we can't allow, and Sean, you and I talked about this, and Megan, we talked about this, and I said, I just me as a grown adult could never see myself acting that way in a building. And if it was a parent that was on my team, if I had kids that were on that team and they were acting that way, I wouldn't allow it. I just saw a video yesterday of a coach who was absolutely losing on the bench, and he's standing in front of these 10-year-olds, and he's if that was a teacher in a classroom that was acting that way, he would have been fired. But for whatever reason, we allow it to happen in the sports venue. So when it happens, it has to be addressed. Maybe parents and spectators might be challenging, but maybe we give the coach the opportunity to correct his ways and give them the one warning. But when it does cross the line, we have to allow our officials to have the confidence to and the courage to make the decision to have somebody ejected. It's not an easy decision to make.
For sure. I just to address something that's there in the chat. I think Nathaniel brought it up. The Hockey Canada rulebook doesn't really address this specifically about spectators. So every place is a little bit different. In Hockey Eastern Ontario, we have a policy about spectator abuse and that officials can be thrown out. So it looks like Jason is thank you, Jason. So Jason's sharing our policy here in HEO. And it is funny because as you were talking, I remember back to 2003, I was working a game in Sussex, New Brunswick, and we actually had fans leaning over the top of the penalty box so that we couldn't actually even get over to report a penalty. I mean, nowadays that would never happen, right? Like someone would actually address that. But at that time, the thought of removing someone was just wasn't even, considered. But to go back to another question here, so David in Newfoundland asks, do we as officials and coaches sometimes get forced into a position on something like maltreatment and not dealing with things appropriately by the leagues and executive branches that we work with? So I guess should it be really dealt with at a higher level than us on the ice, or are we kind of getting forced into dealing with it because, the leagues won't deal with it or don't deal with it?
I would hope that there be some sort of a reporting system that when a you know when a parent is ejected from whatever team, like we don't need to necessarily get the name of who the parent was, but if we say that the coach from Kirkfield, or sorry, a parent from Kirkfield was ejected, and for the most part, it's pretty easy to identify which side of the rink they're from, or which team they're from. I would hope there'd be some sort of a tracking. Somebody's looking at that when the reports go in that says, geez, Kirkfield has had 4 parents ejected in the last 8 games. I think we need to have a sit down with the coach, with the manager, with the team itself, and we don't necessarily need to do specifics unless it's a repeat offender, and then maybe we do. But I would really hope that there be some way of for an official to be able to report that, so that we don't have this continuously reoccurring. And yeah, hopefully you have an administration and an executive that takes it seriously enough, that wants it removed from the game enough, that's going to follow through with addressing the situation.
So, as a follow up, there's just something that came to mind. I notice when I'm coaching officials that, there's often spectators or parents that are a little over the top. And this season, particularly, I've started, not looking for a fight, but I've gone over and asked to speak to them privately and have actually said, hey, you know, take it easy. Like, where do you stand on that? I mean, I know it's not sort of in our role, but my fear is that if officials are looking at us, watching spectators yelling at them, and we're kind of not doing anything, like, well, do you have a kind of a position on that or thoughts on that?
I think that's a great point. Like, we're there to support the officials, and if we're not supporting them off the ice, um, we're kind of letting go of one of our responsibilities. So yeah, if you're there as an officiating coach, and you can have a conversation with a parent, or maybe it's a coach in between periods, and just say, hey, listen, what you're doing, what you're saying is crossing the line, and you need to tone it down. I think we're doing a disservice by not doing that in our role as a coach. And I know some associations will have their mentors and coaches have their association jacket on, or something that identifies them, which I think is great. I think that's a great thing to have. But if you can go there and identify yourself as, I'm here coaching the officials. Um, they're doing their best that they can, and whatever corrections need to be made, that's my responsibility. Stick with your responsibility of cheering on your team and being proud of your kids, but you don't have the expertise to be really speaking the way you are, and it's not acceptable. So yeah, I think coaches, when they have that opportunity, or when that opportunity presents itself, I think they're doing a disservice to our team, our program, by not stepping in and helping out, especially when you have young kids out on the ice. I always, whenever I talk about this, and I talk with a friend of mine, we always use this term when we're talking about abuse of officials, especially young kids. No, no, you're abusing a child who also happens to be an official. And I
Mm.
think if we can reinforce that, like I get you just see black and white and you think that they're experts and professionals, but they're still kids. They're kids just as much as the kids are out on the ice. So if you can reinforce that, listen, you're talking to a child this way, you're talking to a kid this way who also happens to be an official who's doing a good job. I think maybe that snaps them out. Maybe that hopefully it'll be snapping them out.
Thank you for that. So one more question in this kind of section, just getting away from the maltreatment stuff. But one of the other questions Robert asked earlier was, how do you see video and technology helping with coaching younger officials? And have you had any personal experience using those tools yourself?
That's a fantastic question. I appreciate that. Um, video video can be an absolutely wonderful tool. It can be a great tool if it's used effectively and used for what its intended purposes. If an official is just simply going to be watching for what's right or wrong, it's really easy to pump yourself up and beat yourself down. And that's the worst mindset for an official to be in. We want to be riding that even wave. When I was working with the NHL, we didn't have a officiating manager in the building every time, and sometimes we would get a video clip sent to us. And I worked with guys that would beat themselves up. Oh, I got another clip where I made a mistake. With maturity comes the understanding that you can look at it first of all to see if you're right or wrong. But the more important thing you take away from it is what can you learn from it. When I'm supervising or coaching an official in the college league and we have access to the video right there, I will watch the play first of all to see whether the correct call was made, whether the correct icing was made. And then from there, I'll watch it a second time to see where the officials were, to see what they could have done differently. So if you use video for the right reason to self-evaluate, self-critique, and see what you can do differently next time, it is an incredibly valuable tool. If all you do is use it to show right or wrong and pat yourself on the back or kick yourself in the butt, terrible. And if we are instructing our officials to use video, please, please, please reinforce that with them. Watch it to see what corrections, or forget about corrections, what you did right on that play. Use as a positive. Like, hey, remember that hooking play that was going through the slot and there was a player on either side of him, but you were ahead of the play and you were able to see the angle and you caught that infraction. That's what we want to see. That's what we want. That is the perfect position. So reinforce the positives using video as much as you use it as a tool to make a correction.
Okay, excellent. So another question from Robert there, and again, it kind of dips back into the maltreatment area, but have you ever been in a coaching role where you had to support an on-ice official in removing a coach from the game?
No, I've never had a situation like that. However, I have recently had some situations where coaches may have crossed the, not me, they absolutely crossed the line in how they conducted themselves, and have had to have the difficult, not difficult, but I've had to have the discussion with them of, first of all, making sure that what they saw was correct, and which is really irrelevant. But there are times where I have had to talk with the coaches and say, listen, what you're doing is not right. I'm going to use another example, and forgive me for doing this, but I had a coach last year. He was new to the college league who came from junior hockey, who his mannerisms was every stoppage of play he was yelling. And I came off the ice, and the officials did a great job. There was nothing that needed the amount of yelling that the coach was doing. So in my role, I go in and I talk with the coaches before the first game and before the second game. It's a Friday, Saturday series. I go and talk with them. And I went into the dressing room after the first game and I said to the officials, I said, what was he yelling at? Like there's nothing there for him to yell at. And they said, that's just how he is. That's how he was back in junior. Some of the officials had seen him in junior hockey and knew what his tendencies were. And so Saturday night, I go into the dressing room and I have my conversation with him, and we talk about what happened the night before, and any concerns, any questions, do I need to clarify anything with regards to any rules, penalties? And when it was done, I said, you know what, can you and I go out in the hallway and just have a conversation? He's like, yeah. So he and I left the dressing room and we walked out. And I said, I'm going to put down my clipboard here in my role as as an employee of the college league, but I'm going to talk to you as a professional official to a professional coach. What you might have been able to get away with and conduct yourself at the junior level is not going to fly here, because they're going to tune you out really quick. And second of all, how you conduct yourself on the bench tends to filter down to how the players treat and act. And I had the conversation with him, and I could see initially he was very defensive. He was like, no, well, don't tell me how to do my job. But then when I explained to him why, like, it wasn't just a case of you need to stop yelling. It was, again, explaining the why. A light switch went off, and he said to me, when we were done our conversation, he said to me, he said, you know what, thank you. I've never had somebody from the officiating side ever explain that mindset, that mentality, what the officials think. I've never had anybody explain that to me. So Saturday's game goes on. We go out there. It's like it's not even the same coach on the bench. He yelled, but he yelled when he needed to yell. And I'll never forget, I finished with the officials in the dressing room, and I come out and I'm standing in the hallway, and he walks by, and he's like the little dog who's about to get a treat. And I don't mean to sound sarcastic or make light of the situation, but he was like, "Hey, how did I do? Was that better? Is that what you wanted to see?" So to have that conversation that hopefully makes a change long term and gives him a different perspective, and hopefully helps him as a coach and his team as well, and maybe changes how they see officials, is a really good interaction with them. It was a really positive interaction with them that easily could have gone the other way. And don't tell me what to do. I'll do my job how I want to do my job. You tell your guys to do their job. It was a very good conversation. So when you have those kind of opportunities, I think you should absolutely take advantage of them. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but
No, that's great. No, that's really interesting. Um, I want to move on to talk a little bit about sort of mental health, mental toughness, pressure. You and I have talked. I'm a mental health clinician by trade, so this stuff, of course, is fascinating and interesting to me. And some of the questions we got were related to that. So, no doubt, you're officiated for 22 years at the NHL level, right? So that has to come with intense scrutiny. I know me and you joked about that the other day about the difference in, pressure depending on your job, but how did you handle that criticism, pressure, or difficult moments during games when it happened?
so I'll just reiterate what my answer was to you. So for everybody else, my job, although perhaps under the microscope sometimes, was no more stressful than anybody else's job. I firmly believe that. Um, I was able to handle the stress within my job no differently than the brain surgeon is able to, go into a procedure with the ability to handle that kind of stress. And that to me is far more stressful. And I bet if you talk to them, they'd be like, yeah, no, that's just another day at the office. But ultimately, what it comes down to is the preparation. Is if you're prepared every night when you go out on the ice to be working hard. I never looked at preseason games any differently than I did playoff games. Because if I was always preparing the same way, if I was always doing things in fifth gear, there was no other gear to try to search for, right? So that comes down to preparation. I had a great conversation with one of our college coaches this year, and he and I were just sitting there in the restaurant one night, and I said to him, coaching is new to me. This is new to me, and I want to be as good a coach as possible. And if I can pick the brains of an experienced coach and get some coaching skills from him, I try to take advantage of that. And I said to him, I said, how do you handle the stress of your job? And he looked at me and he kind of tilted his head to the side and he goes, my job's not stressful. He goes, we've done everything we can to prepare. I've trained the players as good as I can. I've given them every tool to succeed. It's up to them. It's the more you're prepared for something, the better off you are. We've all been there. We've all taken tests where we are nervous as heck going into it because we probably didn't study as much as we should have. Or you go into a test where you're extremely confident because you've studied the textbook, you've studied your notes. There's nothing they can throw at you that you haven't heard before, right? So the better prepared you are, I firmly believe is the easiest way to deal with the stress. Now, when it happens, I had a really firm rule that, and it was kind of twofold. First of all, we weren't allowed to have social media. Not saying that people didn't, but I never looked at newspapers. I never looked at press clippings. I would watch highlights to see the highlights. I'd have the volume down. I never listened to the distractions. I never listened to those outside voices. Because again, it's like using video. You can ride the wave of, geez, Galloway did a great job tonight, or Galloway was terrible. I don't even know what he's in the NHL for. He should be fired. That's a really easy way to put stress on yourself that really doesn't need to be there. So in this day and age of social media, if you can tell your officials to stay away from it, I mean, every league now, every team is going to have a Facebook or an Instagram page. Tell your officials to avoid it. I had 18 years of preparation time before I got hired into the NHL. I worked every level. I've been in the senior rinks in cold northern Manitoba towns, and I've seen the stuff that happens there. So when I got to the NHL level, I'd basically seen pretty much everything possible. Now it was just in a different venue. So I really firmly believe that being prepared to go into every situation, and it might not be the same situation that you had, but you've had a similar situation. I talked to my dream job. If I hadn't had this one, I would have loved to be a pilot. It would have been my absolute dream job. I've flown a plane once and it was the coolest experience of my life. And I've talked to pilots that I know, and I've talked to pilots just sitting in the airport. And I've asked them, I said, you've got the coolest job. And they're like, it is the most boring job you'll ever imagine. And it blows me away every time I hear that. But it's a consistent answer. They say 95% of the time I'm sitting up there looking out the window and nothing's going on. The plane's basically flying itself. But it's the 5% of the time where stuff goes sideways that they have to be able to respond to and react to in an instance. And the reason why we don't have planes falling out of the sky or being blown off the runways is because they've had the experience of, they've gone through the simulators where they've cut the engine, or they've got the crosswind as they're coming into the landing. And maybe they've never experienced that actually in the cockpit, aside from a simulator, but they've had the experience to know when this happens, this is what you do. And it becomes second nature and instinctual. I once heard about pilots, you look in the cockpit, you see all those buttons on the wall of the cockpit. They're trained, and if there's pilots on here, they might be able to explain this better, but they're trained to do it blindfolded, where they know that if I need to hit this button, it's there, right? So now it's just muscle memory. And I think that's the same thing in our job as officials. The more we see stuff, the more we experience it. When we get to the higher level, it's not a stress because we've already seen it. Now we just need to respond to it.
So I agree with you 100% about preparation, right? There's no question that, and David mentioned this as well, talked about the mastery comment earlier, dealing with pressure and intensity. Like, if you're master skill, then it becomes more muscle memory. But you can still get in your head, right? People can still get in their head despite how good they are. And like you said, you got in the NHL. I work for the government. I don't get videotaped every day, and I don't run the risk of getting fired at the end of the year if I didn't do a good enough job. You do. Like, was there ever any time when you got in your head or before a particular game or got particularly stressed and despite all your preparation? Or do you know people who have and how they manage that?
Yeah, well, listen, I'd be an absolute liar. I'd be an absolute liar to say that that's never happened. I had a kind of a routine on the ice, and I had things that I said to myself. If I had, and I always equated my game to the same as a player does. Every stoppage of play is another shift. If I had had a bad shift, if I stayed focused on that, the next shift was going to be twice as bad. And I had this thing that I would tell myself, that's it. It's done. There's nothing we can do about it. We'll talk about it afterwards. We'll deal with it afterwards. But I need to move on. And that's sometimes easier said than done. But that was my coping mechanism of dealing with stuff within the game when it would happen was I would park it. I would literally say, that's it. It's done. Yeah, you messed up that offside. You're not going to miss the next one. So I would have those kind of tools within the game. I would, of course I had runs where games weren't quite going the way I wanted to, or I had bad travel in between, and that impacted how my game went. But I don't know. I had the ability of just being able to park it for the moment, and I use that term all the time. Park it for the moment, and then I'll come back to it. And we had a mental sports psychologist, sorry, come and talk with our HP officials last year in Manitoba, and she had a very similar way of dealing with it. Like you just need to let it go within the moment. Not that it didn't happen. We'll address it, but in the moment, dwelling on it's not going to work for you. And the same thing goes going into the next game. You learn from what happened. You set yourself up that I'm probably going to experience the same thing tonight. Now I'm just going to figure out the best way of dealing with it.
So,
There's, I mean, you could go further into this, and you could talk about pregame preparation. You could talk about being getting a good sleep, and all those other aspects of it. Our travel was the hardest part of our job. I'd work a game and get off the ice at 10:30, and by the time I crawled into bed, it was probably midnight, and I might have to be up at 5 o'clock to catch a commercial flight the next morning. So our sleep was always broken up. But it's controlling what you can to make sure that you're best prepared and in the best mindset tomorrow to go back to work. So if it meant taking a nap in the afternoon, or if it meant, listen, guys, I'd really like to go with you for a drink after the game, but I've got to go back to the hotel and get some rest for tomorrow. So like it's a whole bunch of tools that we use to keep ourselves mentally ready to continue on with the game and avoid those stresses that come with it. Hope that answers some of the.
no, very helpful for sure. So Beggs asked a question here, and we talking about communication specifically with coaches, players. Do you have any tips for working with younger officials on communication, particularly during heated moments?
Yeah, don't be afraid to. I think sometimes we have officials that are so afraid to talk that they just clam up and don't talk to anybody. And I think there's a way of talking. There's a way of listening to what the player or coach has to say, understanding where they're coming from, but then also having the confidence to state why you made your decision the way you did. And the more we do that, the more we talk with the players, the more we show them that we're humans and listen, we make mistakes as much as they do, probably less than what the average player does in a game. But the more we can own our mistakes, and the more we can defend through explanation of why something was done properly, I think it's just better for ourselves, better for the game, that they are less likely to have animosity towards you if they understand you as a person. I had a hard time when I first started. My wife used to say, "You are not having fun out on the ice. You must hate your job," because I would go out there with a big game face and scowl and look like I was mad at the world, and that was reflected in how players were responding to me. That was reflected in how coaches were responding to me. And it took me a few years before I finally changed that to, listen, I'm gonna talk with these players. I don't need to have the stern face. I don't need to have the impression that even not saying that I'm right and you're wrong. But if I come across as stern, if I look like I'm not approachable or not ready to be talked to or able to be talked to, that's the perception, and I won't go from there. So I would go out of not go out of my way, but I would start conversations with players about things that were happening during the game, so that the next time it happened, if I was having battles with a centerman on the faceoffs, I would go to him during a TV timeout and say, listen, here's what's going on. I want to work with you. I want you taking the faceoff. I don't want your winger coming in. I want you taking the faceoff, and they want to take the faceoff. So the more I was able to talk with the players, the more I was able to talk with the coaches on a person to person level, as opposed to coach official, us versus them, which I absolutely detest. The more I was able to explain my position within the game and why I'm doing something, I think just helped build that rapport and communication and understand a mutual agreement or mutual understanding of each other. We don't necessarily need to leave the conversation agreeing, but at least you've heard my side as much as I've heard yours. So I think our officials could do a better job at utilizing conversation and building that rapport. Absolutely at all levels.
You reminded me, so when I started officiating 35 years ago, we were clearly told under no circumstances are you to ever admit a mistake. Never acknowledge an error, right? And I remember being about 10 years in and in university, tired at the end of a night and trying to come up with some excuse about how I messed up some call. And I just told the guy, listen, missed it. Shouldn't have missed it, but missed it. And the reaction was funny because they really didn't know how to respond to that. It's something they had rarely seen. And the basic response from the coach time was, all right, like what else can I say? I've won the argument if there was supposed to be an argument. And so, what can you do but say, hey, listen, I'll try to keep a closer eye next time. So this is an interesting one that comes up all the time about game management versus rule application, right? And folks that are on the Facebook group there, the Hockey Canada Officials group, I get frustrated sometimes because um, people want to sometimes they'll ignore the rule and say, well, that's not how I would do it if I was playing, so I wouldn't call it that way, and the back and forth. So officials struggle sometimes with the difference between managing a game and applying the rule book. How do you think officials should approach that balance? And how should we approach that as officiating coaches with officials on games as well?
So there's the proverbial discussion about game management, right? Like that's the bread and butter of what officiating is. But game management is just my opinion of the game. It's my opinion of how I think the game should go. And the challenge is that my opinion is different than Sean's is and different than Brian's is. I've maybe to a fault at times. I was really focused on the rule book that I didn't necessarily see kind of the intricacies and was it an important penalty at the time, or was it a did I need to stop the play on a good race on the icing, or could I have let it go? Um, I, my mindset now is more there's negotiables and there's non-negotiables. And the negotiables are, did it have really any impact on the play? Was it dangerous? Was it behind the play that really has no impact? Did it not involve a scoring opportunity? Those are negotiables. Those are the ones where we can go, yeah, it's a penalty, but it's not really impacting it. We could have a penalty, we could have multiple penalties on every single shift. But that's not what the game needs. That's not how we play the game. That's not how we do it. And then I've got the non-negotiables. And those are the safety. Those are the dangerous, violent, unnecessary ones that if we overlook is going to derail the game. Like a hard punch in front of the net in a 5-0 game towards the end of the game. Like yeah, right. We all want to get off the ice, and it's not going to change the game. But if we don't address that, it's going to snowball a minute later, right? So those are the ones where there's no negotiating. Like we those are the ones that we have to call, or scoring opportunities. We can't. The whole game's about putting the puck in the back of the net. If we don't call infractions that are in scoring opportunities, then we're gonna have hockey circa late 1900s where or where you had Gretzky skating down the ice with a player on his back, right? And the game is so much better now because we put in those rules that allow the game to flow, where we allow the skilled players to really shine and show their abilities. So those are the ones when we're talking about scoring opportunities. Those are non-negotiables. And when I go into the dressing room afterwards, and when we're breaking down the game and we're talking about penalties, I will point out the ones that we can't overlook those. And it's I also understand that penalties aren't always called because of judgment. Sometimes it's because they just didn't see it. But if we do see it and it's a dangerous hit, or it's a scoring opportunity, or a goaltender gets run over that didn't need to happen, and that's going to cause a brawl on the next faceoff, those are the ones we can't overlook. So game management's also one of those things that, depending on who you talk to, it's how they see the game, right? So I've got coaches that I've dealt with in the past who, when it comes to infractions involving their team, or infractions that were against their team, or, like, if the scoring opportunity was taken away from them, it's black and white, right? It's well, how'd they miss that? Why was that not called? Yet when their player does the same thing, all of a sudden it becomes well, it's like, did we really need that penalty at that time? So it's been interesting stepping into this role and seeing the different perspectives on the same call. Like, you could we had a game a couple weeks back where one coach, rightfully so, should have had a penalty called in his favor, and then the other coach says, "Well, that was a great non-call," right? Like, how can we have two opposing views on the same play, right? So game management, as much as that's such a used term, and something that I think is I think it's important. I think the better thing we can reference it, though, are the negotiables and the non-negotiables. And then the more we focus on the non-negotiables, I think the negotiables become easier. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense. I get it's always a tough area to nail down, right? Because officiating is an art, really, in a lot of ways. I mean, there's the rule book, and some of the best referees I ever work with are ones that can feel the game, right? And understand when the right time is calling the penalty, not. And the ones that struggle are ones that are purely black and white. And it doesn't matter when in the game, what game, they're calling it exactly the same way. And for them it's easy, but it doesn't always leave them in a good spot with teams, right? Because they don't have that ability. So
Right.
um so sorry, did you want us to add something there, Ryan?
Nope. Nope.
Okay.
No, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. And in all transparency, sometimes I was probably the one that was throwing the fuel on the fire when it probably wasn't needed. In my role now, especially when we're looking at the difference between a minor and a major penalty, and we have to really go with the rule book, and we want our officials to have the courage to make the right call. I always go with what's supportable. Like, if a player is injured on a hit, or on a play that requires a major penalty, but we decide to call it a minor because, well, we didn't think it was bad enough, how's that supportable, right? Like, I can't support you on that. So there's the negotiable, non-negotiable game management, whatever you want to call it, but there's stuff that has to be called, and I can support you. I can't support you if you call the wrong thing, but I can support you. And like, it might be tough to kick a player out, but I can support you for it.
Fair. So, from your perspective as an officiating coach now doing higher levels, like what separates a good official from from a great one at higher levels of hockey? What differences do you see?
I think the biggest difference between I think most officials are good, but the separation from good to excellent or great or one of the best is being able to put the same game back to back on a consistent basis, right? Like everybody can have a good game and everybody can have a bad game, but it's the official that is able to have a good game on a consistent basis. They can string together 10 games in a row that all were well officiated games. Those are the ones that are the great officials. The ones that can see the entirety of the game as opposed to just the snapshots of what's happening in the moment. The ones that are able to see stuff that happens before it even happens. Like I love when I was on the ice being able to see a hit, see a something happens in the corner, and I know what the player is about to do before they do it, and I get there, and they're about to slash the guy in the back of the legs, and they're looking, you go, what are you doing here? That's the difference of that situational awareness, that game awareness of being able to see the entirety of the game as opposed to just focused on one specific thing, um, and being able to respond. They the great officials, I mean, they have to have exceptional rule knowledge. I mean, that's our bread and butter. They have to be great skaters. They, without being without having the ability to get to good sight lines, you could have the best rule knowledge, but if you don't see what the infraction is, your rule knowledge is irrelevant. Um, I think the other thing is the official that never stops learning, that is a true student of the game, that wants to be better, that even when even some of the top officials that I've worked with at the professional level still wanted to be better. Like they hadn't just plateaued at the top. Like they still wanted to keep going. So they were always open to feedback. They were always open to ways to make their game better. They were always looking for the feedback. I really I really admire the officials who prepare on a nightly basis like it's the biggest game they've ever worked, right? Like there's no taking the time off. There's no, well, this is 12 seed against 1 seed, and this is going to be an easy game, or it's 29 versus 30, right? Oh, this is going to be a nothing game. This is going to be an easy game. Well, those are the games that tend to go sideways really quick, right? So you need to be mentally ready to go every single night. I think that's another thing that separates a great official is that they don't change their style of game based off of a preconceived idea of how the game is going to go. Uh, I think that's really important. In my role now as a coach, I love seeing an official that's coachable. You don't need to, if I come into the dressing room on a Friday night and I say to you, I need you to do this, or I want you to do this. I want you to try doing this. And if I see them go out there and they try it, that to me is probably one of the most rewarding things, right? Because they've absorbed what I've asked them to do, understood why I'm asking them to do it, and they've tried to implement it. Now, if it doesn't work for them, that's fine. I'm what I was doing on the ice wasn't necessarily what all my coaches and supervisors told me to do, but I was able to understand what their end message was, what their goal was, what they wanted me to do, and I was able to find my own way to get there. So we still accomplished the same goal, we still accomplished the same end result, but we have the flexibility to find the way. So coachability and the ability for them to understand what you're trying to accomplish and trying what you're doing. And if that doesn't work, well, then they still want to stay within task, but I'm going to try to find a way to do it the best serves me for what I need to do.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So I wanted to, I mean, there's other questions I have here, but I did want to turn it over to the group to see if there's anything specific they wanted to ask. But before I even do that, I'm putting in the chat right now a feedback form for this session. There's a bit of work that goes into these, and it's really helpful for us to determine what what was useful, what was not as useful, what was helpful, not as helpful, etc. We have we're hockey officials. We have pretty thick skin, so we just want to make sure that when we do these things, that there's value for you. So if you can click that link and do that before the end of the evening, that would be great. But before that, or in the meantime, want to turn this over to the group. So if anyone wishes to put something in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask Ryan a question, something else that you're thinking of, any kind of burning thing. I'll leave that open for you guys to do right now.
If we can. So when we get into this, I really hope that people just unmute and we have a conversation, right? I think that's an important thing. I appreciate that some people might not want to feel confident in asking a question, and that's fine. But if we can open a dialogue and a conversation, as I said at the beginning, this is new to me. That I'm a new coach, and I hope to take something from this as much as I hope you all are taking from it as well. So if there's a question and I give an answer and we want to have a discussion on it, and we can come to an understanding the same way as we would do in the dressing room when we're talking with our officials, I'm all for it. So look forward to the questions. John, you're muted.
Continuing theme. So Jason, I see you posted one in the chat. You just want to ask the question out loud, if you're okay with that?
Sure, yeah. So what's the requirement to be the one providing the coaching in Hockey Canada these days? Like I just returned to the game last year, and I'm back to level 3. But in 2000, I ref from 96 to 2001. Level 3s had to do supervisions. What is that now?
I think nationally, Sean, you jump in here. I know Hockey Canada with this committee that Sean and Megan are involved with. This is what they're trying to do, is get a mentorship program that's available to different areas, different associations, for them to institute into their areas. I think every person who's ever put the stripes on has something that they can give back, and I don't ever want to discount somebody who wants to be part of it, who wants to give back to the program, who wants to be part of making the program better. I would never discount anyone. But what I would say is, when you do take on that role, first of all, you take it on for the right reason. You take it on because you want to be doing that. It's not about the money, or it's not about opportunities. It's I'm doing it because I understand what it was like to be a new official that didn't have the support. We need to get past that. We need to have our senior officials, any official who's willing to come back and be part of the program and give to their area and give to their program. We need that. Now, having said that, it's important that when you're doing the coaching, when you're doing the mentorship, that you're giving the information based off of what the standards and expectations are from Hockey Canada. Or, if we have anybody here from USA Hockey or anywhere else, you're providing the information based off of what is the current expected standards, as opposed to what I did, like for me to go back, Jason, for me to go back now and go into a Hockey Canada rink, it'd be very easy for me to go back and provide information that I was doing at the professional level, but that's not applicable at the amateur level, right? So when you are going into those rooms, make sure that the information you're giving them is the information that is applicable for the leagues that they're working on. Does that answer your question? Sean, maybe you can, and Megan, maybe you can give some feedback as well on kind of what the mentorship program is doing.
You want to jump in, Megan?
Yeah, I don't mind speaking to this. This is why we brought Sean on, which is why it's so exciting. To get straight to the point, Jason, there is no requirement or qualification. It's like, hey, you want to help out? Yeah, come on. You can give feedback. And, much like there is a pathway for officials, you take your level 1 clinic, you become a level 1, and then you work your way up. There's nothing like that for coaches. But on the player side, if you want to coach U9, you got to take this qualification and do this and that. And we're trying to build that. We really are. But it's very much if you would like to, it's available. And even then, it's minimally available. And it really is just reliant on the Gretzky effect, right? Just because you could skate, we would like you to coach. And then from there, it's a bit of like, train the trainer through mentorship of what was previously existing with no real best practices, and it's all very gray. So our goal eventually is, yes, to build out a proper pathway. We've got some buy-in from a lot of members on doing that. We are trying to partner with members to do them in person, but we've run them in some online settings in the past couple of years, and really it's targeting mentors and officiating coaches who are teaching level 1s and 2s. Basics, how to give feedback without just listing a bunch of stuff they did wrong, how to properly identify personalities and go from there, and really identify that it's more of a conversation and what your coaching philosophy is as well. Some of us who have been officials typically got well, you need to do it this way. Well, without any real strategy on how to do it. And then to Ryan's point about really reinforcing the why, we don't talk about the why, or we also don't give officials enough credit for self-evaluation, right? They need to be able to unpack, what they feel happened and what they feel should be the best approach, particularly because it is an individual skill sometimes, like how to communicate with coaches. The way that I communicate with coaches will be very different from how Ryan or Sean communicates with coaches. And then as you build confidence and knowing your skills and all that, that's also where we can connect with officials, to the earlier comments about when an official doesn't know their weaknesses, and we kind of have to guide them there, or when they're too insecure of their weaknesses and they let it cloud them when it comes to identifying where their actual strengths are and all those things. So really, we're working backwards. We're working with those that are very confident and clear in their communication. And we're saying, hey, come take this training. And it's kind of just reinforcing what they already know, versus if you take your level 2 and 3 officials who are 16 all the way anywhere from those that have been around for generations, if we took them right at the beginning and we trained them the right way, it wouldn't feel so scary to go out and coach if you're a level 2. It would feel very easy to go out and even be a shadow on the ice and give feedback, and you can build your own kind of coach philosophy throughout the couple of years that you're building. But it does require capacity from a referee in chief, an association, a member. And when we get there, they're already bogged down with so much to do. So we just keep spinning our wheels. Our goal is to take some of that away from the responsibility of referee in chief and building mentorship. But it does take quite a bit of volunteer capacity, and can't always reach our 37,000 officials with a handful of people teaching it. So are you based out of Ontario at all, Jason? Where are you based out of?
Yes, I am. I'm in HEO, District 5. Yeah.
Okay.
We've got a great program that's going on up here. Lots of positive, but that's part of the reason why I got back into the game, because I realized that the old people who helped me out when I was a kid, I realized they weren't that old, and that's how old I am now. So, it was time to get back in and start giving back to the game.
Right. Yes. So we are running some mentorship courses in partnership with TELUS Cup, and I know it's pretty far from you. They're going to be in Peterborough on the 18th and 19th of April, which is exactly what I'm talking about. It's a course designed for level 1 and 2 mentors / supervisors, officiating coaches, as we change the language. And then there's a course for referee and chiefs as well on how to run a program. Really, and if you're a parent or you know somebody in your community who's just not an officiating person, they can take this course. They can take this leadership course to learn how to run a program, and they don't need anything technical about officiating as a background. That's kind of what we're trying to do, is also build capacity there, because the people that do run the programs, we seem to have this strange idea that they need to do everything. They need to mentor everybody, they need to assign, they need to sit on the board, they need to know officials, they need to be able to train them. Like, that's too much. And so if we should really, many hands make light work, if we take the people that don't have the technical knowledge to run the program, where can we leverage those that do, so they don't feel as burnt out being required to do everything. So Peterborough, 18th and 19th, for those of you in Ontario, come on down. Registration will be handed out through the OHF and the OMHA and surrounding member partners. So Richard, you have a question?
Before we jump to Richard, I just wanted to add one thing to that. So two things. First of all, I'll be in Peterborough if you want to come and say hi, because I'm the one delivering those courses in Peterborough. The second thing, and this just, you reminded me of something, and Megan, you just talked about this. I did a presentation for OMHA on Tuesday night, and these kind of conversations come up. So I can teach a good person with good emotional intelligence. I can teach them the rules, okay? I cannot teach a great referee to not be an asshole. And so, and all I mean by that is personality is hardwired from about age 7. You show me an 8-year-old, I can tell you roughly what they're going to be like personality-wise in their 40s, okay? So what that means is, and we have lots of coaches, I've seen them over the years, that it doesn't matter what you tell them or how to communicate, they're never going to learn that, right? But if you have someone who just really is a good coach, a good mentor, we can teach them the rules. And so I think we don't do a good enough job in kind of bringing those people on in the community who would be kind of keen and interested. We're a little bit closed shop like that. So yeah, we'll go to Richard. Then there's a couple of questions here, and we can go back to those next. Go ahead, Richard.
Thanks, Sean. So this kind of question goes out maybe to Megan, Ryan, or even Sean, or anyone really. So my district here, we have over 100 officials that. About 6 coaches that we're doing our coaching sessions. And what we do every month is we do like, a full meeting with everyone. So it's more of that, classroom setting. So I'm wondering if any of you have any, kind of tips or guidance really around, encouraging attendance and engagement during those sessions. I think we're struggling, and I know we're getting closer to the end of seasons, stuff like that, but if you have any ideas or things you've done in the season that can keep younger officials coming to those meetings, they still play hockey, they got a lot of things going on, or if you have any kind of tips or ways to keep them engaged and get them to these kind of sessions. Any thoughts there?
Are these sessions requiring their engagement, or is it more information delivery and listening?
It's a little bit of both, because we'll do there's a ton of video going on, especially nowadays with social. You'll get like I get like 3, 4, 5 videos a night. Look at this, what happened. Now, as far as the administrative side, not worried about that. I use those as teaching tools, right? And it goes back, Ryan, to what you had mentioned before about you use both sides. It's a tool, right? It's not look what you did bad, or it's look what you did good, or let's rewrite this play and we do like an SRD on everything. It's both. It's passive information, couple tournaments coming on, so get your availability in type thing. But it's also about let's review all the stuff that we have to review from the last month.
I think that's great. That's really what I think driving the first part of engagement is requiring their participation. Then I think the next step is rewarding the participation. So is there a way that you can reward it with maybe an assignment? Maybe it's a shout out with social media. I'm thinking of these free options, but then if you like really wanted to invest in it, you could do like, hey, you get a $20 gift card if you attend, or you're entered for a draw to win something. Or you can gamify it. You can say, hey, there's some questions here. If you get these questions right, because they should be easy if you're paying attention, you win something.
Okay.
Or you're just, you know, if it's a culture that really gets motivation from recognition, that might even be a motivator in itself.
Okay.
And you can even do them like asynchronously for people that might not be able to attend a live session. You can send out a quiz, you can send out a recording, and you can give people the option to even watch the recording and still participate. And then, you know, they participated with actually like engaging, so to speak, but they have engaged because they've listened and maybe they've learned something. I would even go as far as to like reward parents who are incentivizing and encouraging their kids to be a part of it, right? Like, hey parent, we appreciate you getting this set up for your kid. Parents only can enter to win something, and recognize their support as well.
Okay.
Richard, if I can give you an idea. So I did work with an association back in Winnipeg a couple of years back. They invited me to a similar meeting to what you're talking about. It was kind of a mid-season refresher, get everybody, you know, touch base again. I think a really valuable thing you can do is make sure you're having fresh voices. Like having the same person delivering the same message repeatedly, I think just
they're listening to me every month,
right? So if you can bring somebody in who's got the same mindset, same message, but it's coming from a different voice. One of my friends, his kids refereed, and the dad refereed as well. And he would say to me, my kids are not listening to what I'm telling them about what they did wrong in the game. Can you just tell them? And it was the same message from just a different voice, right? So if you can do that, where you bring in a guest speaker and, you know, send the message from a different voice, or bring a coach in, bring somebody in that, you know, might have a job that's similar to what we do. Police officer, for example, bring a police officer in there where they can talk for 15 minutes about what they do and how it translates over to what they do as officials. Just reinforces the message from a different voice and a different perspective, and might be the thing that keeps them coming back for the next meeting. Just a, you know, simple thing like that.
Is that an offer?
I'm not a police officer.
Thanks. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
I've said this to many folks. Part of my role and part of Megan's role is where, you know, in the past, Hockey Canada, the officiating side has not been great about sort of reaching out. And in the last couple of years, we've been trying to increase that. So if you have a group of officials that you want us to talk to, and in the virtual world, we can do that quite easily, like, don't hesitate to let us know, and we can do something like that. I do these probably sessions, I don't know, 10 or 12 times this year. So if that's a value, we're certainly happy to do that. Just to let you know, so Michael asked a question about drills. So in the chat, I put a link to my Google Drive where I've collected a bunch of this stuff, like mental health and drills and things. If you have any you'd like to add to that, feel free to let us know as well, and we can do that. Just wanted to go back to a couple of other questions here. So Dryden asked a question, cracking the old boys club that still exists in a lot of associations and branches. So if officials can't get feedback or emails answered in terms of, you know, coaching, supervision, or personal improvement, what can they do? So anyone that would like to jump in on this, it's the politics of hockey, and it exists in officiating just like it exists, you know, as for players as well.
Well, if I can make a suggestion, if the intent is personal development and growth, and you're not getting the coaching that, you know, we all hope and through this this initiative, hopefully that's going to be better off across the country. But talk to a friend. Talk to a friend to come out and watch you work, and give you feedback. And sometimes a friend can be a little more direct too, and give you some different perspectives and some different feedback than maybe a coach would. But taking every opportunity to learn, no matter where it comes from, I think is critically important. Now, to break the old boys club, I sort of alluded to it about not being an advocate enough for myself. I don't think there's anything wrong with an official when they get to the point where they're able to make the step or the jump into the next league, to put together your officiating resume, put together what you do off the ice, your involvement in the game, and reach out to whoever the refereeing chief is, director of officiating, and just say, hey, listen, I'd love the opportunity. And maybe it's not this year, but I'd really like to be there. Trust me, I sent probably 4 letters to the NHL before I got hired, asking for information on what I needed to do to get to the next level. So there's nothing wrong with asking for information. There's nothing wrong with putting your name out there when you're in the right spot to be able to make that jump. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And I really hope, this is my altruistic mindset, that we're all here for the right reason, but at some point the old boys club becomes the boys club that doesn't exist anymore. So we need that movement into those spots. So the more we can put it out there and not rely on, geez, I saw this kid work in Flin Flon, Manitoba, as the only opportunity for them to get in. What if that young official from Flin Flon puts their name forward to the refereeing chief and says, hey, listen, I'd really like the opportunity. I'd like to know what I need to do to get to the next step. Be an advocate for yourself as well. Other thoughts?
We do have a question from Eddie here as well. He's asked this a couple of times, so I'm going to get to it. You kind of referred to some of this stuff earlier. He says, for young officials who want to get to the CHL, NHL, PWHL, how do you get to that level as a young official? What does he really need to do to stand out compared to your sort of peers?
Well, I think it goes back to that question about what makes a great official. What you have to be doing things on a consistent basis that just stands out. You have to be following what the expected procedures and positioning is. If you're a great official, if you're a good official, but you're doing stuff that's not what is the expectations, but there's another official who is, 100%, that's the official that's going to get the opportunity. So making sure you're doing things on a consistent basis. And I loved when I had the opportunity, if I was working a regular schedule in junior hockey, but I had the opportunity to work some AAA games, I love that opportunity to go back to that level. And when I say go back to, I don't mean like it was a step backwards, but go to a level that's maybe a little bit slower, maybe that's a little bit easier to process things, so that I could work on the things that I've been told at the junior level that need to be worked on, but in a easier spot. So that when I did go back to junior hockey, those things I'd worked at the AAA level were second nature. And I didn't need to do it at the junior level and make mistakes out in that venue. I could do it in a place where it was a little safer and a little bit slower to really bring those into second nature.
Excellent. There's a question there. I don't know if it's really a question or a comment from Brian. What about getting refs in the men's league, beer leagues to be qualified? Good luck, Brian.
We don't want to. Keep them there.
Any other questions? Anyone want to unmute themselves, ask a question? Please go ahead.
I just wanted to go back to Eddie's question on the pathway to pro hockey. There's not really one singular pathway. In the Hockey Canada pathway, it's pretty linear. Level 1, 2, 3, member high performance, /5 performance. But if we are talking realistically, you can be a level 2, level 1, and if you have amazing skating and you have a certain hockey IQ and you put yourself out there, there's a chance that you could get to pro hockey much differently than you would through a Hockey Canada pathway. That being said, though, if they're young officials and they really look at the wow factor of a pro hockey, we want to tell them to play hockey for as long as they possibly can, as high as they possibly can. We also tell them that put yourself out there, go to camps, go to these types of sessions, hot stoves, and make sure that they keep up with all of their skating and fitness. And that's really like the best advice I can give anybody who's looking to make pro, because that door is very, 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 very dark, and we don't really get insight even at the highest levels as to what the selection process is. Even the PW is having a hard time picking up our suggestions and things like that. So to be quite frank, they got to be a great athlete, and that's as far as they can go. We have Tom who's got a question. Tom, is it related to this one, or is it a new question?
No, it's related that I would agree with what you say. Also, I know of a linesman that said he's going to be a linesman in the NHL, and he'd come into games where he's supposed to referee, and he'd say, no, I'm going lines. And he actually worked in the NHL when Ryan was there, I believe. Mike Civic, who was, did a lot of work with him and back in Calgary days. And that's right. He just said, I'm going to be a linesman in the NHL, and that's what he got.
Yeah, I think I think the more well-rounded an official you are, seeing the game from both the refereeing side and the lining side helps both roles. So I'd encourage any official to, you know, take on the challenge of working both jobs. But I will say, listen, my personality, my mindset, my wife says this to me all the time, and she is batting 98% on this. She can walk into a room of officials and she could point out to you who the referees are and who the linesmen are. Without fail, she could point them out. There's different personalities, there's different skill sets, there's different things that each one has. And if a guy like Mike Civic, probably one of the best teachers I had when I was, you know, first in the NHL, a man I have the utmost respect for. There's nothing wrong with saying, I want to be a linesman and being the best linesman you could possibly be. I think sometimes we look at it as it's always a progression from you start off as a lines person, then you become a referee. If you have an official that wants to be a great linesman and that's what they want to do, there's nothing wrong with that. I'd still encourage them to still give it a try, but if that's what they want to do, why stifle their potential or their passion because of what you think that they should be doing?
Yeah, diverse experiences make for great officials. It's the exact same stat that we see on NHL players. I think only 2% of NHL players who actually get drafted play hockey all year round. 98% of them played another sport in the off season. So similar philosophy, if you will, for officials. The more that you referee and the more that you line in different capacities at different levels, the more that you are equipped to actually make it at the highest. Because we're being honest, the most adaptable referee is the actual one that is the most successful. Be able to walk in any situation, no matter what.
You made a great point. If I can just go back to something for a second, You made a great point about, you know, players playing as long as they can and you know, still officiating at the same time. If you have a young official who, you know, is deciding whether they want to officiate or whether they want to play, and you know, do I have the time to do both? I'd encourage them on the mindset that being a good official is going to make you a good hockey player too, right? Like that just brings a whole new level of game awareness and you know, how the game actually works. That's going to improve them as a player. And conversely, I only played till I was 15. I wasn't having the fun that I should have been having as a player and decided to step away, found another sport that I got involved with. But officiating was always a passion that for whatever reason I loved and I stuck with. And if we can encourage players to play as long as they want to play and still officiate, or if they want to step away from the game and focus more on their fishing, that's fine too. It's like you said, we want to have the well-rounded athlete that has a really good awareness of the game. I think the mindset of an official is completely different than the mindset of a player. That at some point you have to look at the game from a different perspective. But I think each one adds to the your ability to be a good official.
Absolutely. Yeah. Trent, finally over to you.
Sure. Thanks, guys. Doc, just really appreciate you guys kind of put something like this together. Just, I guess, kind of question, comments around, obviously we can say everybody wants to referee in the NHL and the best leagues, and everybody wants to work the league final and get invited to the championship games, but majority of the officials don't, right? And our official coaches are kind of the boots on the ground, so to speak. So what's maybe the message that we can take back to those guys as far as like, not everybody is going to get there. We want to develop you to be the best official you can be, which maybe your capacity might be 13A hockey, but how do you kind of like nail that message in, I guess, from an official coach standpoint of like, why are you doing this, and don't so much focus on that one goal that maybe most of us can't get to, but how do you move forward from there?
It's kind of like the players, like there's only a small number of players that ever get to the level where they're even scouted, to the point where they're even drafted, to the point where they play minor pro, to the point where they actually make it to the NHL. But the underlying thing is that they have a passion for the game and they have a passion for playing, right? So we need to instill that same mindset that, listen, having the goal of working in the NHL. And I still remember when I walked into a clinic when I was 16 years old and said that was my goal, and the way people laughed at me. But it's okay to have that as a goal, but also realizing there are so many incredible things that can happen from officiating along the way. Like, professional hockey is not the end all be all. There's international assignments, there's national assignments, there's the opportunity to work the finals in whatever league you want to work. Bottom line is we need to instill the passion for always striving to get to the next level, but recognizing and appreciating also where you currently are and the successes you're having where you currently are.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate that. And that's kind of the message we, try and take back to our officials is, you have a passion for it. Are you enjoying what you're doing? And if yes, then we can continue to try and help you through the path. Right? So.
Perfect. Well, thanks for doing that, Trent. That's what we need. We need good young officials that are wanting to be the best that they can. So good on you and your association for doing that.
Rob in Ottawa.
Hi, how's everybody? So just wanted to quickly touch base on and get your opinion on in coaching officials who aren't quite sure, like they're starting to get into the higher performance, the junior C's, the triple A's, and they're not sure what direction to go as a referee or a lines. They're struggling with which direction. Obviously you want to coach them to go in both ways, but at the same time, help them to understand where they might be best suited to, which direction they might be best suited to go. How would you kind of handle that?
I found I got to a point where I knew where my strengths were. I knew not only where my strengths were, but also the role within the game that I really enjoy. I enjoy being kind of the a friend of mine uses this all the time, and one's harmony and one's melody, and I always like being kind of the background that just makes the game flow. I like being the background sound that just adds and contributes to the entirety of the song. But when you do find that, whether it's reffing or lining, that's when you have to make that decision and jump with it and stick with it. And if you have the opportunity to, again, go back to a lower league, and I caution how I say that, but you have the opportunity to go back and work on your reffing skills while you're focused on lining at the higher level, or working at reffing at the higher level and lining at the lower level, or vice versa. Take advantage of it. Get every rep that you possibly can. The more experience you have, the better all-round official you'd be. I don't know if that answers your question, Rob.
Yeah, it's kind of more on how to provide guidance to the younger officials that are struggling with that decision, with that choice, like from a coaching side of things. So, but yeah, I know what you're saying, and just trying to foster both, and yeah, no, thank you.
Sometimes it's a case of watching them and helping them based on what you think, right? As much as you want them to make a decision themselves, sometimes it's like, hey, you did a really good job doing this. That's more of a liney trait. But if you don't have fun doing that, I wouldn't suggest doing it. So I got told what to be, frankly. I wanted to be a liney all my life. I loved being the harmony, like Ryan said. I love the glue. I love bringing my team together. And they were like, you have main character energy. You should be a referee. I was like, okay, sure, I can do that. So there might be opportunities to also gauge that way. I don't love that I was told that, but it is what got me the most opportunity. So I came to peace with it.
Fair enough.
Any other thoughts from anybody else on the call on maybe how they've handled that situation, or how they've addressed it?
I'm mindful that it's already talk.
Yeah, it is 9:03. I was going to say, I've had instances where, you get that crossroads, and I always fall back onto, in the end of it all, we're here to make hockey happen across Canada, right? So it doesn't matter, it's AAA, or I think Trent used the 13A house, or 13 anything. It doesn't matter. We make hockey happen. I mean, without us, out there every night doing our thing and nurturing our craft, hockey doesn't happen, and we can't get in that state. So I kind of fall back on those words. Usually when I have those kind of conversations, it's like, I'm not there yet, or I can't get there. I don't think I can. It's just keep on crafting, keep on doing your thing, and reading your books, and knowing your procedures, and doing your thing, and, good things will come your way.
So I am cognizant of time, and I want to respect people's time. It is a little after 9. I know Ryan said he'd stick around for a few minutes. Myself and Megan will be here for a couple minutes as well. If you want to stay and ask other questions, great. Just a quick reminder again, if you please, if you haven't already, and I know some of you have, please take a moment that's in the chat to just complete our feedback form. It really helps us moving forward. And, as Ryan, again, I just wanted to thank Ryan for jumping on with us tonight. It's always a pleasure chatting with him. We have over the last couple of weeks, and I've had the benefit of asking him some very specific questions about games that I've coached in, and they've been really interesting conversations. So thank you, Ryan, for jumping on, and everyone as well for your time. It's great to see so many people interested in officiating coaching, but also doing it right, and doing it well. So thank you to all of you for that. And yeah, that's it. Unless you have some extra questions, we'll stick around. But thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, everyone. The role you play in this is so incredibly valuable, and I appreciate that Hockey Canada is doing this, and sincere thanks for trying to make your program and our program better. So thanks for having us, and thanks for taking the time to be here.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Richard, what kind of guitar is that?
Bye,
It's a seagull.
Thanks for doing this.
It's a seagull. Just learned to play over COVID.
Nice, good for you.
Nothing else to do.
Good for you.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Jason, thanks for the question and for wanting to be a part of growing it in your area too.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ryan. It's it's a topic that's been big on me for lately, right? Just because we want to get back in and be constantly trying to build into the game. So we need to have it happen in the community, and so that's where I'm at right now.
Oh, it's great. We need people like you to be coming back and being involved and taking an active role. And I know this program that Sean and Megan are working on in their committee. Hopefully it'll be, if you don't already have, and actually you said you have a great program in your area, but if there's anything that can be taken from it, great. It's just going to help grow the program.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's structured per se, but the people that are involved in the organization are strong right now, and so it takes a village, as they say, to raise a bunch of good officials. So so right now everything's very good, and that's awesome. It's great to see the game developing. Yeah, so thank you, and your experience has been very helpful to all of us, I'm sure, and we look forward to hearing more from you as you continue on. Appreciate it.
Jason, I appreciate it.
Thanks, and have a good night.
You too.
Bye, Jason.
All right, I will stop recording.
Sorry, I realized I'd